Everybody, welcome back to chapter 6 of Alice. This chapter is called Pig and Pepper. For a moment or two, she stood looking at the house and wondering what to do next, when suddenly a footman in livery came running out of the wood. She considered him to be a footman because he was in livery. However, otherwise, judging by his face only, she would have called him a fish, and rapped loudly on the door with his knuckles. It was opened by another footman in livery, with a round face and large eyes like a frog. And both footmen, Alice noticed, had powdered hair that curled all over their heads. She felt very curious to know what it was all about and crept a little way out of the wood to listen. The fish footman began by producing from under his arm a great letter, nearly as large as himself, and this he handed over to the other, saying in a solemn tone, "For the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet." The frog footman repeated, in the same solemn tone, but only changing the order of the words a little, "From the Queen, an invitation for the Duchess to play croquet." Then they both bowed low, and their curls got all entangled together. Alice laughed so much at this, she had to run back in the wood for fear of them hearing her. And when she next peeped out, the fish footman was gone, and the other was sitting on the ground near the door, staring stupidly up into the sky. Alice went timidly to the door and knocked. "There's no sort of use in knocking," said the footman, "and that for two reasons. Firstly, because I'm on the same side of the door as you are, and secondly, they're making such a noise inside, no one could possibly hear you." And certainly there was a most extraordinary noise going on, a constant howling and sneezing, and every now and then a great crash as if a dish or a kettle had broken into pieces. "Please then," said Alice, "how am I to get in?" "Well, there might be some sense in your knocking," said the footman, without attending to her, "if we had the door between us. For instance, if you were inside, you might knock and I could let you out, you know." He was looking up into the sky all the time as he was speaking, and this Alice thought was decidedly uncivil. "But perhaps he can't help it," she said to herself. "His eyes are nearly on the top of his head. But at any rate, he might answer some questions. How am I to get in?" she repeated aloud. "I shall sit here," the footman remarked, "until tomorrow." At this moment the door of the house opened, and a large plate came skimming out, straight at the footman's head. It just grazed his nose, and broke into pieces against one of the trees behind him. "Or the next day, maybe," said the footman, in the same tone, exactly if nothing had happened. "How am I to get in?" asked Alice again, in a louder tone. "Are you to get in at all?" said the footman. "That's the first question, you know." It was, no doubt, only Alice did not like to be told so. "It's really dreadful," she muttered to herself, "the way all the creatures argue. It's enough to drive one crazy." The footman seemed to think this was a good time to repeat his remark, with variations. "I shall sit here," he said, "on and off, for days and days." "But what am I to do?" said Alice. "Anything you like," said the footman, and began whistling. "There's no use talking to him," said Alice desperately. "He's perfectly idiotic." And she opened the door and went straight in. The door led into a large kitchen, which was full of smoke from one end to the other. The Duchess was sitting on a three-legged stool in the middle, nursing the baby. The cook was leaning over the fire, stirring a large cauldron, which seemed to be full of soup. "There's certainly too much pepper in that soup," said Alice to herself, as well as she could for sneezing. There certainly was too much of it in the air. Even the Duchess was sneezing occasionally, and as for the baby, it was sneezing and howling alternately, without a moment's pause. The only things in the kitchen that did not sneeze were the cook and a large cat, which was sitting on the hearth and grinning from ear to ear. "Please, could you tell me," said Alice, a little timidly, for she was not quite sure whether it was good manners for her to speak first, "why the cat grins like that?" "It's a Cheshire cat," said the Duchess, "and that's why." "Pig!" She said the last word with such sudden violence that Alice quite jumped. But she saw in another moment it was addressed to the baby and not to her, so she took courage and went on again. I didn't know that Cheshire cats always grinned. In fact, I didn't know that cats could grin. They all can, said the Duchess. Most of them do. I don't know of any that do, said Alice very politely, feeling quite pleased to have got into a conversation. You don't know much, said the Duchess, and that's a fact. Alice did not like the tone of this remark, and thought it might be well to introduce another topic of conversation. While she was trying to fix on one, the cook took the cauldron of soup off the fire, and at once set to work throwing everything within her reach at the Duchess and the baby. The irons came first, then followed a shower of saucepans, plates, and dishes. The Duchess took no notice of them, even when they hit her, and the baby was howling so much already that it was quite impossible to say whether the blows hurt it or not. Oh, please mind what you're doing, said Alice, jumping up and down in the agony of terror. Oh, there goes his precious nose, as an unusually large saucepan flew close by and nearly carried it off. If everybody minded their own business, the Duchess said in a hoarse growl, the world would go round a great deal faster than it does. Which would not be an advantage, said Alice, who felt very glad to get off the opportunity to show a little bit of her knowledge. Just think what work it would make with the day and night. You see, the earth takes 24 hours to turn on its axis. Talking of axes, said the Duchess, chop off her head. Alice glanced anxiously at the cook to see if she meant to take the hint, but the cook was busy stirring the soup and seemed not to be listening. So she went on again. 24 hours, I think, or is it 12? Oh, don't bother me, said the Duchess. I could never abide figures. And with that she began nursing her child again, singing a sort of lullaby to it as she did, and giving it a violent shake at the end of every line. Speak roughly to your little boy and beat him when he sneezes. He only does it to annoy, because he knows it teases. And there was a chorus, which the baby and the cook joined. Wow, wow, wow. While the Duchess sang the second verse of the song, she kept tossing the baby violent up and down, and the poor little thing howled so that Alice could hardly hear the words. I speak severely to my boy, I beat him when he sneezes, for he can thoroughly enjoy the pepper when he pleases. Wow, 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 wow. Here, you may nurse it a bit if you like, the Duchess said to Alice, flinging the baby at her as she spoke. I must go and get ready to play croquet with the Queen. And she hurried out of the room. The cook threw a frying pan at her as she went out, but it just missed her. Alice caught the baby with some difficulty, as it was a queer shaped little creature, and she held out its arms and legs in all directions, just like a starfish, she thought. The poor little thing was snorting like a steam engine when she caught it, and kept doubling itself up and straightening itself out again, so that altogether in the first minute or two it was as much as she could do to hold it. As soon as she had made a proper way of nursing it, which seemed to twist it into a sort of knot and then keep hold of its right ear and left foot to prevent it undoing itself, she carried it out into the open air. If I don't take this child away with me, thought Alice, they're probably going to kill it in a day or two. Wouldn't it be murder to leave it behind? She said the last words out loud, and the little thing grunted in reply. It left off sneezing at this point. Don't grunt, said Alice. That's not at all the proper way of expressing yourself. The baby grunted again, and Alice looked very anxiously into its face to see what was the matter with it. There could be no doubt that it was a very turned-up nose, which was much more like a snout than a real nose. Also, its eyes were getting extremely small for a baby. Altogether, Alice did not like the look of the thing at all. But perhaps it was only sobbing, she thought, and she looked into its eyes again to see if there were any tears. But there were no tears. If you're going to turn into a pig, my dear, said Alice seriously, I'll have nothing more to do with you. Mind now. The poor little thing sobbed again, or grunted. It was impossible to tell which, and they went on for some time in silence. Alice was just about beginning to think to herself, now what am I going to do with this creature when I get home? When it grunted again, so violently, she looked down to see its face in some alarm. This time there could be no mistake about it. It was neither more or less than a pig, and she felt that it would be quite absurd for her to carry it further. So she put the little creature down and felt quite relieved to see it trot quietly into the wood. If it had grown up, she said to herself, it would have been made a dreadfully ugly child, but it makes a rather handsome pig, I think. And she began thinking to herself of other children she knew, and who might do very well to be pigs. And she was just saying to herself, if only they knew the right way to get started to change them, when she was a little startled by seeing the Cheshire Cat sitting on the bough of a tree a few yards off. The cat only grinned when it saw Alice. It looked good-natured, she thought, but it had very long claws and a great many teeth, so she felt it ought to be treated with respect. Cheshire Puss, she began rather timidly. She did not know whether it would like to be called the name. However, it only grinned a little wider. Well, it's pleased so far, thought Alice, and she went on. Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to get, said the cat. I don't much care where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat. As long as I get somewhere, Alice added as an explanation. Oh, you're sure to do that, said the cat, if you walk long enough. Alice felt this could not be denied, so she tried another question. What sort of people live around here? In that direction, said the cat, waving its right paw around, lives the Hatter. And in that direction, waving the other paw, lives the March Hare. Visit either if you like. They're both mad. I don't want to go along amongst mad people, Alice remarked. Oh, you can't help that, said the cat. We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad. How do you know I'm mad, said Alice. You must be, said the cat. Otherwise you wouldn't have come here. Alice didn't think it proved it at all. And how do you know you're mad? Well, to begin with, said the cat, the dog's not mad. You grant that. I suppose so, said Alice. Well then, the cat went on. You see, the dog growls when it's angry and wags its tail when it's pleased. Now I growl when I'm pleased and wag my tail when I'm angry, and therefore I'm mad. I call it purring, not growling, said Alice. Call it what you like, said the cat. Do you play croquet with the Queen today? I would like to very much, but I haven't been invited yet. You'll see me there, said the cat, and vanished. Alice was not much surprised at this. She was getting used to queer things happening, and while she was looking at the place where it had been, it suddenly appeared again. By the by, what became of the baby, said the cat. I nearly forgot to ask. It turned into a pig, said Alice, quietly, as if it had been quite a natural thing. I thought it would, said the cat, and it vanished again. Alice waited a little, half expecting to see it again, but it did not appear, and after a minute or two she walked in the direction of the March Hare. I've seen hatters before, she said to herself. The March Hare will be much more interesting, and perhaps this may not be raving mad, at least as mad as it wasn't in March. As she said this, she looked up, and the cat was there, sitting again on the branch of a tree. Did you say pig or fig? Said the cat. I said pig, replied Alice. And I wish you wouldn't keep appearing and vanishing so suddenly. You make one right giddy. All right, said the cat, and this time it vanished quite slowly, beginning with the end of its tail and ending with the grin, which remained some time after the rest of it had gone. Well, I've often seen a cat without a grin, thought Alice, but never a grin without a cat. It's the most curious thing I ever saw in my life. She had not gone much further when she came in sight of the house of the March Hare, and she thought it must be the right house because the chimneys were shaped like ears and the roof was thatched with fur. It was so large a house that she did not like to go near until she had nibbled some of the left-hand part of the mushroom and raised herself about 2 feet high. Even then, when she walked to it, rather timidly, saying to herself, I suppose I could be raving mad after all. Almost wish I'd gone to see the Hatter instead. that's the end of the chapter. The next chapter is chapter 7, A Mad Tea Party. See you soon.